Hi, John. Welcome, everybody. This is it's 3 o'clock. Let me call to order this special meeting of the BOPEC Subcommittee of the Elections Commission. Martha, if you would read instructions for the public and then take roll call, please.
I shall. Okay. Here we go. Welcome to the January 28th, 2022 special meeting of the Budget and Oversight of Elections Committee. This meeting is being held by teleconference pursuant to the governor's executive order and the 24th supplement to the mayoral proclamation declaring the existence of a local emergency dated February 25th. The minutes of this meeting will reflect, due to the COVID-19 health emergency and to protect commission members, city employees, and the public, the meeting rooms of City Hall are closed. However, commission members and the staff will be participating in today's meeting remotely. This precaution is taken pursuant to the various local, state, and federal orders, declarations, and directives. Commission members will attend the meeting through WebEx video conference and participate in the meeting to the same extent as is physically present. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments or opportunities to speak during the comment period are available via phone call by calling 415-655-0001. And you will need to enter the event number, which is 24833321620. I'm so sorry. You will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will be automatically muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up, dial *3 to raise your hand and be added to the public comment line. You will then hear you have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you. The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. Ensure you are in a quiet place. Before you speak, mute the sound of any equipment around you, including television, radio, or computer. It is essentially important that you mute your computer if you are watching via the web link to prevent feedback and echo when you speak. When the system message says your line has been unmuted, this is your turn to speak. You will hear staff say, "Welcome caller." You are encouraged to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 if you need an interpreter. If you change your mind, press *3 again. You will hear the system say, "You have lowered your hand." Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you. You will hear your line has been muted. Public comment may also be submitted in writing. It will be shared with the commission after the meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to elections.commission@sanfranciscogov.org. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Sure.
Yep, roll call.
I'm sorry. Commissioner Bernholz?
Here.
Commissioner Chappell? And Commissioner Jordanic. Okay, with 3 present, we meet quorum.
Thank you. Item number 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the subcommittee's elections commission's jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda. Is there any public comment?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. Got a slightly janky connection here, but item number 3, discussion and possible action on the resolution on continuation of remote elections commissions meetings. I think we need to have a motion and a vote on the resolution about continuing to meet remotely.
Okay, we do also have a public comment.
Oh, we
request.
do? Back on
Just
item number
FYI.
2?
Yes.
All right, let's go back to that.
I'm sorry. No, it would be on the, not on the public comment, on item number 3.
Okay, well, can I get a motion to move on this resolution before we take public comment?
Okay.
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second?
Okay, public comment?
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Great. David Philpell, good afternoon. As usual, I have no objection to the findings. I just note that the text of the findings that's in the packet for today is the commission findings, and I would suggest that you substitute in whole the language from BOPEC from October, which is specific to BOPEC and not commission.
thank you. Yeah, we'll make that change.
Thanks.
Any other public comment?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Unless there's any further discussion among the commission, we can vote on this motion with the note to make sure that the language is up specific to BOPEC. Go ahead, Martha, you call the vote.
Sure. Commissioner Bernholz,
Yes.
Commissioner Chapel,
Yes.
Commissioner Dragonic.
Yes.
Okay, with 3 in the affirmative, the motion passes.
Thank you. Item number 4, approval of minutes from the previous meeting. We discussion and possible action to approve the minutes from the October 6th, 2021 BOPEC meeting. Any discussion by commissioners? You got a motion?
Move to approve the minutes from the prior meeting.
Thank you. Second?
I second.
Thank you. Is there any public comment?
Yes, 1 hand raised. I will unmute you, caller. You have 3 minutes.
Thanks. David Philpell again. Once again here, there are some style and non-substantive things. For example, on page 2, somehow Chair Donaldson appears under item 5. If you want to trust Commission Secretary Delgadillo and I to work on this with Chair Bernholz's final approval, that would be fine. If you want this to come back, then you can put it off. There's nothing substantive that I would suggest, just to clean up some formatting. Thanks for listening.
Thank you,
Happy to
David.
help.
The Commissioner Chapel is maker of the motion. Are you okay to amend it to include revisions as suggested by the member of the public?
Yep. Move to approve the meetings from the minutes from the prior meeting, incorporating any changes that the member of public provides, subject to President Bernhold's approval.
Thank you.
Hi, before you vote, I think the best course here is actually to make the amendments and bring it back at a future meeting of the Elections Commission or another BOPEC meeting. It's vague to say make the changes as requested.
Okay.
Even though they're stylistic and not substantive.
If the Mr. Pilto, this is so unusual, but I mean, if they're minor things that could be set now, then they should probably be said, and that should be taken as the revisions.
Okay. Is Mr.
I'm still here. Do you want me to summarize on the record very quickly? Does that work
Yes.
for the game?
Yes, please.
Sure. So it's still listed as a notice of special meeting rather than minutes, commissioners. I would clarify that Chair Bernholz was actually chair of the committee at the time, so I think vice chair should be replaced with chair throughout. I believe at the time the committee was Chair Bernholz, Commissioners Jung and Chapel, so throughout. And I think the rest of it is like the word here or there, but that's the basic thing, is to clean it up into minutes. says nothing else. That's the sum and substance. Thanks.
You noted those video?
Yes, I did.
Okay. City Attorney Flores, is that specific enough?
Yes.
Okay.
There was also the replacing Commissioner Donaldson with the correct name too. I don't know if you mentioned that.
Thank you. All right. So I think unless there's any additional public comment, we can vote on the motion.
Okay, President Bernals, how do you
Yes.
vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Chapel and
Yes.
Commissioner Jordanek.
Yes.
Okay. With 3 in the affirmative, motion passes.
Okay. Item number 5, Department of Elections budget proposals fiscal year 2022-23 and fiscal year 23-24. Discussion and possible action regarding the Department of Elections proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23 and fiscal year 23-24. Let me start by thanking Director Arntz and his colleagues at the department for this very comprehensive and accessible report. My understanding is that at this meeting of BOPEC, are we seeking to take action that would move these to the February 14th meeting for approval, or do we do that all at once on February 14th? Because the February 14th meeting is required, so. Does anyone?
Well, my understanding is that there just needs to be 2 public hearings on the budget.
Uh-huh,
I don't know if BOPEC has to take a positive action today
okay,
in relation to the budget, just as long as the public has a chance to provide input.
got it. So if we were to take action, it would probably be at the February 14th meeting where it would, okay. Thank you, Director Arntz, for that clarification. So again, thank you very much for this report. Let me defer to my colleagues, see if they have any questions. I've got several, but I'll wait. Commissioner Jordanek.
Thank you very much, Director Ernst, for the materials. Had a couple questions about a couple topics. The first one was on the increased poll worker stipend. And I noticed you only had the stipend increase for the second of the 2 years. Is that correct?
Right now, yes.
Yeah. What was the thinking on that? Because if it's something that you thought would be a good idea, why not do it for both years?
Right, and potentially we that might change between now and the commission meeting. The concern that we have is that under the Internal Revenue Service tax code, a volunteer who earns stipends in excess of $600 must be issued a W-2 form in relation to that income. So if we have we have 4 elections this calendar year. So even though the fiscal year is from July 1st to June 30th, tax year is from January 1st to December 31st. So they're different time frames. So with 4 elections in this calendar year, if we were to increase the stipend, potentially more poll workers would be having to be issued W-2 forms, up to maybe even 2,000 poll workers. And we've been in conversation with the city on how to resolve obtaining the tax information from poll workers and then issuing the W-2 forms. But we didn't want to increase the stipend to exasperate the poll workers receiving too much in their stipends, and we get into this tax form and tax reporting issues. But potentially, if we can resolve how we're going to be gaining the tax information from the poll workers, then the city can. Then we also understand how the city can issue W-2s to these poll workers, since they're not employees. That we may ask the mayor's office, or before we input into the budget system, we'll ask the mayor's office to provide the stipend to both fiscal years, not just next fiscal year. So it's still an open question. It's just a matter of how we're going to resolve the stipend and tax issues.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. And then my next questions are around the there's quite a bit of material in here discussing the the decision of whether and when to renew the Dominion contract. They're the two 1-year options to renew. And my first question is, can you explain like where's that decision reflected in the forms, like in the dollar amounts and so on? Like, is there a line item that has the that is impacted by that decision in the dollar forms?
And so the contract is under the professional services.
Okay. Which page is that?
What's that?
Which page is that?
Yeah, I'm looking.
Okay.
Oh, it's not in the forms.
Assuming the same.
Okay, so it's not in the forms, but we're just, because why?
Oh, no, so, it's, so part of our budget, so we're still assuming the same $2.5 million going to,
Is it in a different category then, or?
no, it's still on the same, other professional services.
But it's not listed?
It's not mentioned.
But it's in the totals in here though.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So what page, do you know off the top of your head what page that is?
Form 3A.
3A. It's under Form 3A, Commissioner Jordanic. Then
Other professional services.
Right.
other professional services. So it'd be on the first page of a budget Form 3A. The title's expenditure changes. At the bottom, you'll see other professional services. And so the contract's listed in that row, but it's not a separate line item.
Okay. All right. So okay. So I guess my next questions are around I mean the text in the memo discusses how it's very unlikely that a system, an additional system would be certified between now and the time by which you would have to decide whether to issue an RFP, but which would be July 2022. But it seems that it's a little bit different for the July 2023. Like that's July 2023 is a year and a half away, and it seems like there is a chance that there could be an additional system that's certified between now and then. So I'm wondering, is there any reason that you can't sort of like, it seems like the decision to extend at least 1 year is pretty clear, but as far as the second year, is there any reason you couldn't postpone that until next year to kind of wait and see how things look?
Yeah, so we laid out the factors in the memo, and it's really a decision for the board. So if the board wants to approve the contract for 1 year, then that's the board's decision. If the board chooses 2 years, that's the board's decision as well. But we just want to provide the information. This will also go to the board when the budget hearings occur.
Okay, so you're not really making a decision either way on it in this document?
Yeah, we can't. I mean, because the contract amount will exceed $10 million. Then also the extensions themselves are over, what is it, $500,000. We have to bring this to the board for their approval. And so since there's 2 1-year options, the board could choose to approve 1 year. They could choose to approve 2 years.
Okay. And then related to this, I think the chart on the top of page 6 is very helpful to like understand the different options. And I was wondering if maybe you could, between now and the commission meeting, maybe just supplement the chart a little bit, because on the previous page there's like 2 periods. You have the bid and negotiation period from 6 to 8 months, and then the implementation outreach period 4 to 5 months. And the thing that I think would be helpful in understanding is to add a couple more rows. Like it says the date you'd have to issue a new RFP, and then one thing that's not clear to me is what would be the approximate month where you would need to have the agreement signed by, sort of like basically 6 to 8 months past that issuance, right? And then the other row would be, it says 4 to 5 months for implementation outreach. Like how far in advance of the election do you need to finish that phase?
Well, it's not just the outreach, it's also the bringing the system into the department.
Yeah.
Because the department has to learn the system as well. So the more time, the better. So I mean, we want at least 6 months. But if we had more, if we had 8 months, it would be better.
Okay. Yeah, so basically it's, you kind of have the date to issue the new RFP, and then you have another date by which you'd like to have the contract signed, and then you have another date by which you'd like to have sort of the new system phased in, and then you have the actual election date.
We can break it out. I mean, those items are actually included in those current rows that are in the button to the memo. So if you read the text prior to that table, we've included those items, but we can break it out for that. That's fine.
Yeah, no, I know. I just meant because I think the table is very helpful. But okay, that's all my. Oh, and then the last thing was on page 5, where it says in the middle of the page it says the department may need to issue requests for proposals for a new system in mid-2022. Would that be for new vote? You need to issue it in either mid-2022 or mid-2023, depending on what you decide there.
Yeah, potentially, right.
Okay. All right, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a couple quick ones, and I know you've dealt with this a couple of times more recently, but this budget, I assume, is really based just on known elections. So to the extent we have any additional recalls, which just seems to be happening more frequently these days, I assume that means you'd have to kind of get additional funding because that would be over and above. And I know we've talked about it a little bit in the general commission meetings, but at a high level, what's the process for you to get additional funding for those kind of one-off or, those one-off elections that do come up?
So the process is we have to first inform the mayor's office, because the mayor's office is basically the starting point for any budget additions to a department's operations. So we'd have to compile our cost estimate, meet with the mayor's office, finalize those costs. The mayor's office would also look for savings in our existing funding. And so even if we asked for, let's say, $10 million, they might try to find $5 million in savings. So we only get $5 million in the supplemental appropriation. So the first step is to work with the mayor's office, settle on the amount. Then we bring that to the board, and the board's budget analyst will review the numbers, ask us questions, and then write a report on the request for the supplemental. And then the supplemental must go through a hearing process at the Board of Supervisors. The first step is with the Budget and Finance Committee. There's at least one hearing, and then there's, if they agree, and they might ask for changes to the budget as well. But if what we presented is accepted at the Budget and Finance, it would move to the board. There has to be two readings at the board because it's an ordinance. When there's a supplemental appropriation, it's actually an ordinance. That's not just like writing a check. It's part of the how would I say it? It's a legal framework. It's how government's funded. The ASO is called the annual something. Yeah, there's two readings at the board, and then ideally the board will approve the funding. And then we have to wait for the city to actually fund the accounts that we would use to make the purchases. So even though the board has approved, there's a 10-day waiting period because the mayor can either approve, veto, or take no action on the ordinance. And then after that period ends, and the controller's office would have to populate the accounts that would have the funding to spend for procurement. And once that happened, then we could start to make the purchases on those accounts for that election. So it's a process, and it takes a few months to resolve.
Got it. Okay. And for the recalls that we have had in the last calendar year, have you had budget constraints, or has that process generally gotten you to where you needed to be as far as kind of funding all of the, the recall elections or supplemental elections?
Well, the ultimate answer is no. We haven't been constrained, but the reason is when the September 2021 gubernatorial recall occurred, the state legislature obtained budget estimates for all the counties to fund the counties for those costs associated with the gubernatorial recall in September. Then any monies that weren't expended from the gubernatorial recall could be moved forward for other elections. So there was actually, I think, because it was like a one-card ballot, it was because we didn't know how many cards it would be at the time, because the gubernatorial recall is different because the candidates are listed who could potentially replace the governor, and then when Gray Davis was recalled, there was like 135 candidates, and with this system, that might have meant 2 cards, So we didn't know what the numbers were going to be. So we had a few $1 million that moved forward in time, even before we knew we were going to have a February election. We knew we had some money, so we had some initial monies already that we could use to prepare for February. But then just recently, this month or last month, I can't remember now, the board did approve a budget appropriation for the department to pay for both February and April in relation to those extra ones that we moved forward from the September election. So right now, no, we're in good shape as far as funding is concerned.
Okay, great. And then unrelated question, as far as the kind of overlap with the budget and the redistricting, it looks like the kind of costs, maybe additional costs that come from the redistricting is really on the outreach and the publicity side. Are there any other kind of costs that arise from the redistricting?
So last fiscal year, I included funds for redistricting in that budget. And so last year's budget, or the current budget, I should say, is actually paying for the cost for the redistricting activities.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to my fellow commissioners who covered several of my questions. Let me just start out, Director Arntz, by saying there's a number of things in here that I found incredibly heartwarming or impressive. Heartwarming may be too emotional, but I wanted to particularly call out and thank you and the department for the increased stipends for poll workers, and thank you for explaining the tax implications, what a mess that is, but especially because of the multilingual issues, the increases in drop boxes, the commitment to languages beyond those that are mandated, I think is just a hallmark of the department and the commission, the commitment to racial equity, as are the partnerships with community groups, which I can't imagine have been anything less than vital during all these changes we've had. I also very much appreciated the depth of information on the vendor contract. Commissioner Jordanek answered or asked, and you answered most of my questions there. I have a very simple question, which is, given that a decision about issuing a new RFP would, if that were to happen, would be needed by July of 2022, am I correct in assuming that the process of having the board vote on that is in place and there's nothing the commission needs to do about that between now and July?
Correct. So the contract is not a commission matter; it would be a board matter.
Right.
So So we would bring the contract request essentially to the board, then they would make the decision.
And do you have a sense of which month you're planning to do that?
It'd be during the budget process.
Okay.
And so we're thinking we go for the June hearings, and that would be part of the conversation.
Perfect. Okay. That leads me to my other questions, which I have so many of them, I broke them into categories. So So, and just a general expectation setting for me and for any public members, this budget, as Commissioner Chapel noted, there are 3 expected elections covered in the time frame of this budget, right? Of these 2 budgets, November 2023, March 24, and November 2024. So any recalls, any special elections, all above and beyond. On that, given the plethora of recalls that the department will have managed by, say, the end of this calendar year, or perhaps you've already done this, is it possible to provide a dollar range for what each of these costs? I mean, I imagine there's a significant difference between the local school board and the governor, or maybe there aren't, but do you have a sense just of what a recall election actually costs the city?
Well, we know what the gubernatorial recall election cost because that was a standalone contest essentially. But with the February election, it's consolidated with 2 other contests, AD 17 and assessor recorder. So there's an elections cost. I mean, potentially you could take that elections. Well, actually you couldn't. But most of the costs, if there weren't AD 17 and assessor recorder in the February election, would have been borne by holding the recall election. So I mean, potentially we could make that estimation. Then for April, we don't know April yet if it'll even occur. And then and also the challenge between February and April is the overlap. Then also by the time we get into April, we're running the June election as well. So April would be, at this point, we could give you an estimate, but I don't know how accurate it would be. But certainly, we could look at the numbers and break it down. It just matters of when you'd want those numbers. And
yeah, I certainly don't need them anytime soon. I'm just thinking certainly by the end of calendar 2022, when department here would have been required to, go so far above and beyond, might be helpful to have some kind of ballpark
certainly
in mind. So then specific to the document, and this may be in the same professional services line Commissioner Jordanic was referring to. I was looking to see if I could find any specific line item costs for the November 22 pilot implementation.
So those costs on the vendor side will be carried by Voting Works.
Right.
And then on our side, I mean, it's hard for us to forecast a number.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have to just incorporate those costs into our operating budget. With having the 1 or 2 ballot marking devices at the voting center and then a scanner, I mean, we probably can absorb that. Then on the risk limited auditing aspect.
Yep.
That could actually, I have 2 thoughts on that. One, if we have to actually do if we have to do risk limit auditing on every single contest, that could be a bit spendy. But at the same time, I don't expect there to be a large number of cards in relation to the election.
Yep.
Ballots cast in the election. So I don't know. But then also, I'm wondering the regulations allow for any contest that's fully counted manually to not have to undergo a risk limit auditing. But the statute for the pilot program requires all contests to be risk limiting audited. So that's a question I'll have for the state, and I'll put that in. I don't know if I'll put that in. I guess I'll put in the application. If there's a way for us to do not do a risk limit auditing for every contest involving the cards that were cast using the ballot marking devices for Voting Works, and do a full manual count for most of the contests. So that would be better for us actually, and that's something we can do rather quickly.
Okay. The not doing a risk limiting auditing because they were hand counted.
Right.
Right. Okay. It occurred to me as I was thinking this through, just that there might be, so that's definitely some of them, staff time for the ballot transferring, and are there any security costs to the city based on the need to have chain of custody, if that's the right phrase, over the machinery?
No, we'll have to wrap that into what we're doing with the Dominion system essentially.
Okay. Great, thank you. My question number 3, I noted that the voting center at City Hall is mentioned, but I may have just missed any reference to others, or we no longer doing voting centers because of the vote by mail?
So we're not doing additional voting centers besides City Hall in this budget.
Okay,
And partially it's because the mayor's budget instructions were for departments not to create new programs, but to fund existing programs.
got it.
And then also part 2 was not to increase costs in relation to existing programs, which, that's our challenge because you really can't achieve that. So we have not offered new programs, and we, for the most part, have not sought increases in existing programs.
Okay. Have you heard any public reaction to that then?
No, we haven't. And it might be because of everyone getting a ballot in the mail.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've got a lot of positive response on the ballot drop-off boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So people are, they are aware of what's going on, but we haven't really received much input. I haven't, at least, regarding other voting centers in the city.
Got it. Okay. The salary information that appears on Form 3B, particularly where it was, did I put my Form 3B? You highlight in your memo and then note in some of the line items here. I'm just checking. These are all in line with the recent audit that was reviewed. Do these have anything to do with that? And
no, that audit that was more of a payroll issue. That was how we were inputting and then tracking any discrepancies between our internal database and the city's database. So no, this.
Okay, this is different.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the item you were discussing a minute ago with Commissioner Jordanek about the poll worker stipends linked? Is that payroll challenge and the pay stipends and the taxes? Is that all part of the same bunch of concerns though, or are those also separate?
They're not part of of anything with position changes or Form 3B or because poll workers are termed as volunteers.
Right.
So they get a stipend, and that actually comes from a revolving fund that's administered by the controller's office. So we'll get a funding amount, but then the controller's office will cut the checks for the poll workers from that fund.
Okay.
Whereas the regular positions, they get issued checks, through the regular payroll, the city.
But okay, so then let me ask a slightly different question. I'm still looking at Form 3B, top row, all the way to the right. It talks about the 350 seasonal staff. So those seasonal staff are separate from the poll workers. Right. Okay. Got it. All right. That makes sense. Thank you. You note on page 11 of your report, and I think prior to that as well, that there are increased security costs coming from a request from SFUSD for those sites. So I have 2 questions. What is the concern, or what is the district requiring security for? And do you know what percentage of your voting sites are SFUSD property?
On the latter question first, I don't know the percentage. It's a high number. We use a lot of schools. We have 62 schools just for February, and we're using it as a consolidated election. But I don't know. I can't think of the number now for a full complement of polling places. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then on the on the costs. So in the past, the school district has always had on-site private security at the schools, and the private security would, I guess, include the space where the polling places are located at the schools as a part of the security job for the day. The school district is concerned that the one person that is on site for the school districts really can't direct people to the correct locations in the building. So voters need to go to the polling location. Non-voters need to go to the front office. And so the school district is asking for us to provide security they asked for security, and that's why we have private security vendors as part of our budget to direct the public to go to the correct spaces at the school. But also the school said they're not really worried about security, but just making sure people get to the right spots within the building.
Right.
So we will also add poll workers to
Okay.
those who are directing voters and non-voters to the correct locations at the school. We know we can't recruit enough poll workers
Yep.
for this, and that's partially why we're trying to get the stipend higher. So for February for sure, and then for April and for June, we know we'll be using private security. And then in November, potentially, if the stipend goes up, we can supplement with more poll workers and cut back on the private security at the schools.
Okay. That makes sense. So that, right, because the preference, I presume, would be to use stipended individuals and not someone who looks like and presents as a security person.
Right. And additionally, if we have poll workers, they can also do the work.
Yeah.
They can set up the tables, they can set up voting booths and, and all
Right.
that. So.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That answers that. That's important. Okay. Then I have a couple of questions that sort of go beyond just the budget. Specifically, in your memo on page 4, you have a sentence about the specific complexities of the March 2024 primary in terms of voter outreach. Is there something in particular you were referring to?
Well, you've been on the commission long enough. So the primaries is when you have the party determines what ballot people can vote for the presidential contest, and then you have the nonpartisan. Some can cross over to other, some can't, depending on the party. So that's the challenge, is trying to get the word out about that. We've done better certainly as time has gone on, but also the media's done better, the campaigns have done better. But still, it's something that you really have to hit and focus on for presidential primaries, about the voter nominated contests such as the president's race, where voters based on their party can select some ballots to vote versus others. So.
Okay, that's helpful. So it's a complexity of all primaries, not just the 2024 one.
Just presidential primaries.
Presidential primaries, right? Okay, got it. That's helpful and clarifying. Thank you. Actually, I guess several of these have been answered. 2 other questions, sort of generalized. Again, compliments on the focus on outreach. The one thing I didn't see called out that I wondered about was specific to outreach that's specific to non-citizens for the school district's elections, whether that was if there were anything specific needed for that or costs associated with that aren't borne by the district but are borne by the department.
So we incorporate outreach to non-citizens in our customary or usual outreach efforts. And then also the mailer that we sent out to all the households before every election references non-citizens being able to vote, certain eligible non-citizens being able to vote in Board of Education elections. But then also we initially, but now it's the Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, receives a $250,000 grant package from the city to disperse to community organizations, specifically to do outreach to non-citizens about their eligibility to vote in Board of Ed. So OCEIA and us, and then of course the community organizations amplify those efforts, and we give the community organizations our materials as well. So it's a group effort, but I guess the biggest chunk of money is going to OCEIA, which is disperses grant monies.
Great. Okay, good. Really good to hear that. Thank you. A totally different topic from the memo. You have a good amount of detail in both the forms and the memo about the additional or the use of a contractor to do the assembly of vote by mail packets. And I was just curious whether the contractor that you've used is who you're planning to use again. I didn't see a specific firm named. And are such contractors certified by the Secretary of State in some way, shape, or form? Oh, they are. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're certified also by the vendor, by
Ah.
the voting system vendor to print that vendor's
Okay.
ballots.
Okay. And are you so you're reissuing a contract, but have you been satisfied with the work of the current vendor?
Absolutely, yeah. So we use K&H printing,
Okay.
and it's an Everett, yeah, and we're very satisfied.
Okay, great. Okay, good. I was just a note about part of my question about the costs of these special elections and recall elections. I haven't been paying attention to this in the last month, but I know that there was some discussion at the state earlier, or closer to the gubernatorial election, that there might be legislation being considered about the costs of those that if you put a recall election on a ballot, you're ultimately responsible for the costs in some way. I don't know if any of that has moved forward in any. Are you aware of any of this? Or,
No, I'm not.
and I was wondering if in the fee structure that you outline in terms of revenue, if there was anything specific, any way the department gets some of its costs covered in fees when there are recall elections or anything like that, other than just the people registering to be candidates.
It depends. So like the school board recall elections, for instance, the district would have had to have reimbursed the department / city for those costs because it's essentially a district election.
Yep.
But that was part of the supplemental budget appropriation that we received. Like I think it was either this month or end of last month. From this must have been this month, where there was $3 million or so that was earmarked as part of the reimbursement from the school district to the department and city for the cost of conducting the recall. But if it were, let's say, recalling the district attorney in a standalone election, the city would bear the entire cost of that election.
Got it. Sure. Okay. I'll keep my eye on what's going on in Sacramento about that. I don't know if any of that's moving forward. Okay. Thank you for bearing with me. I have two more questions, or really, these may just be comments because they're much longer range in mind, but they were sparked by this very comprehensive report. The first one has to do with I'll say I was struck by the need for a new sweeping machine to clean out Pier 31. And I'm wondering, I know that the city is undergoing all kinds of discussions and planning, and probably much more than I'm even aware of, about climate change and the waterfront, whether any of that has or will, or how it might affect the department's use of the pier as a storage unit, and whether those conversations are already underway.
No, we've had no conversations in relation to having to vacate the space because of climate change.
Is that, are you participating, or is there a direct department link to those planning discussions? And is that something we might want to look into, given what I assume is a heavy reliance on that pier for storage, and the need to think about where we might want to put this equipment in times of rising tides?
No, I'm not a part of any conversations. I have to find out.
Okay.
So
I recently, I remember reading about a new citywide group that was working on this, but I couldn't begin to tell you where it was. I'd have to do some digging myself, and I'm happy to try to find it and let you know. Okay, so that's not currently under wraps. And then as I look through both the budget and plans, and of course recognizing that there are limits on new programs, I was just wanting to ask you whether or not, if there were resources available, the department has put any thought into the need for communication expertise, specifically regarding mis and disinformation threats or legal challenges to elections, given just the climate we're operating in and the challenges and threats that are elsewhere. If there were expertise to be had, I don't have a particular job in mind. It just, when I was looking at the outreach column in your org chart, you've got a management assistant and a junior management assistant, and I was just wondering if you've heard of other departments or other parts of the other jurisdictions where there's someone on staff who's tasked with attending to the numerous kind of social dynamics around elections, and if that's a skill or capacity that that the department would be interested in if the resources were available.
Yeah, that'd be, well, I mean, our, if we had that resource, maybe it'd be more specific to San Francisco.
Yep.
Really. But the Secretary of State's office, that was part of the budget 2 years ago from the state. They created a cybersecurity office, the Secretary of State's office.
Mm-hmm.
So that office is tasked with dispelling misinformation, providing guidance to the counties if there's a threat of a cybersecurity or if there's been any, bad information that potentially is harming an elections process. So, and then also we're part of the Secretary of State's office as part of several other agencies that are monitoring social media, websites, circumstances around elections. But specific to San Francisco, no, and I don't know if it's really something we would need to fund because I don't know how much that person would do, other than just specific instances around election. But
So there are resources though that is a staff role now in at the state level, you're saying?
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
so it's an established office that's funded from year to year.
Okay.
And then they're providing guidance and they provide updates, and they're also part of, I can't remember like the name of the organizations, but there's an umbrella group that monitors and issues statements around election security. That the SOS cybersecurity office is involved in as well. But no, we don't have anything locally.
Got it. Great. I'm glad to know that that exists at the state level. Those are all my questions. Thank you for your patience with me.
Thank you.
Commissioners, did you have any others? Commissioner Giovanni?
Yeah, thank you both, Commissioners Chappell and Bernholz, for your questions. And I have one extra question, also a couple follow-ups to some of President Bernholz's questions. First, on the poll workers, I don't know if we've discussed this before. It may even be in the materials. But I can't remember seeing it. The with the all vote by mail mailings and fewer people voting in polling places, are the number of poll workers that are required going down at all since you don't have the same busy times?
Yeah, our target number for each polling place used to be around 5 to 6 poll workers. Now we try to hit 4 poll workers per polling place, but we know that realistically we can operate with 3 if necessary, and that's based on the turnout as well.
And is that reflected in the budget numbers, or do you just sort of allow that to fluctuate?
No, it's reflected in the budget. Okay. For like the increase in the number of poll workers or the increase in the stipend, that's reflected.
I mean the decrease in the number of needed.
Right.
Okay.
The stipend increase. I mean, it's multiplied by 4 versus 5.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then just a couple more questions on the voting system. As a follow-up, you said that the voting system is reflected under the professional services row, but I mean, is there a part of the voting system cost? I think it's a couple $1 million a year, but some of that cost is, and I don't know if it's broken out, but some of it's like leasing the actual equipment, right? Is that lumped in with the professional services?
So it's a lease of equipment and the provision of services.
Okay. And then in response to President Bernholz's question, you said that the resolution to renew the contract will be kind of tied into the budget hearings. Will there still be like its own actual resolution that the supervisors vote on in the context of those hearings? Then?
Yeah, they'd have to. It's separate from the actual budget.
Okay. And then when you draft that resolution for the board, are you going to, what are you going to recommend in terms of, or who are you going to ask in terms of whether it should be renewed for 1 year or 2 years when it comes to drafting that initial?
I would draft the memo. It would the memo and resolution would go to the board. There's not a particular supervisor that would ask. It'd be the entire board.
I mean, what I'm saying is, in your resolution, are you going to be requesting a 2-year renewal or just a 1-year renewal?
We'll lay it
Or
out.
is it-
I mean, we'll lay it out similarly as we did in the memo. Let the board. It's a policy matter for the board to decide. I mean, my recommendation would be for 2 years.
Okay.
I don't think another system will be certified in time for us to go out to bid and secure the system. And this is something, you know, this conversation's been had many times in the years previously when we went out to bid. Like, you know, a system might show up, and it never does. But 2 years is a very short time for elections. And I think it makes sense, but it's up to the board though too. I mean, if a system is submitted to Secretary of State's office, and the Secretary of State's office can give an estimate of when they would finish the review, we could use that information. But without having a system introduced or an application submitted to Secretary of State, no one can even give an estimation of when a system would be approved because no application exists yet. So again, we'll lay it out to the board. We'll provide the information, and if they think 1 year's sufficient, then that's what they'll approve.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, as far as myself, I think it seems like a 1 year would be good, and then we can wait and see, and then do the other year the next year. But yeah, we'll see what the board says.
But the challenge though too is, I mean, as we're going into the next year, 2023, we're going into the mayor's race in November, and then going into the primary in March. So it's a quick turnaround. Then the following year, you're going to the presidential election. So there's also an election, to me at least, there's always an elections timing part of this, not just a matter of when a change could occur. But again, it's up to the board. So wherever the board decides, that's what will happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Is that all the commissioner questions? All right, fabulous. Martha, are there any public comment?
Yes, we have 2 callers on the line. First caller, I will unmute you. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, David Pilpel. Sorry, I was running around the house. We have problems, not just foreign, but sometimes domestic. So I missed some of your discussion, but I did want to touch on 2 points. First, back to Commissioner Chappell's question from, it seems like 45 minutes ago, on what does the department need to do after redistricting, or are there any costs that flow from that aren't capped, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, that's a technical term, blah, blah, blah. My answer in part to that is that the department will need to re-precinct the city based on redistricting with not just the lines that have already been drawn for the state for equalization, Senate, Congress, Senate, and Assembly, but we'll also need to layer on the BART districts and the new supervisorial districts for November. But I suspect, I don't know this for a fact, that there is sufficient staff and funding in the budget for the precinct services group or whoever is doing that to do that re-precincting work. And I suspect, and I hope that that doesn't have to get done again for another 10 years, and that we will be able to keep those same lines through, what would that be? The election prior to June of 2032, when hopefully we're all still around. But in any event, that I think is the follow-on piece to redistricting that the department needs to do to operationalize it for November. I hope that's fairly clear. And then the other piece, given the discussion to President Bernholz, that based on the discussion you just had about the budget, my thought, and I don't like to make more work, so I don't want this to become a big deal. Perhaps in future election plans, there could be another paragraph that just has a very high level budget summary that says, based on all the staffing needs and the systems and procedures and checks and balances and whatnot that are elsewhere in this plan, we believe that this upcoming election will cost blah, and of that, the board either has already appropriated this amount, or we expect to get this in reimbursement from the state, or BART is contributing X amount, the school district is going to have to cover the recall unless that's covered some other way. So just some high-level budget summary in the election plan, and then in the follow-up memo to the election plan from the director after the election, before the commission makes a determination that was fair, free, full, and fun, whatever the 3 Fs are, that there's, again, a touchback on the budget that says, you know, based on our actuals, we believe the actual cost was blah, 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 and was covered in roughly these ways, because there's that significant time lag from when the original election plan is written to when you come back and evaluate it. So that would be a way to capture those kinds of costs, again, at a very high level. I'm not looking for the election plan to morph into some big detailed budget document. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Thanks for listening. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, and did I say that I support the budget and everything that's going on? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, David.
We have another caller. Mr. Turner, I will unmute you now. You have 3 minutes.
I thank you, Martha. And hello, everyone. Brent Turner. Just wanted to make a couple points. First of all, I think the public believes that it is best for John Arnst and the Department of Elections to have funding for anything they need surrounding free, fair, and secure elections. I think it maybe goes without saying at this point in our nation's history, and thinking that California is a leader and San Francisco then a leader in California, we want to be exemplary, and especially since we're pioneering these open source voting systems. So his funding, I'm just hoping that he has everything he needs. Secondly, I wanted to mention about the segmenting of the contractual re-ups. I know it's better for Dominion to get their hands on a 2-year promise and committal from the city, commitment, but I think it's best as Commissioner Jordanic says, that it goes in 1-year periods, especially with the statements by their representative that the people of San Francisco don't care about elections and that the Elections Commission doesn't know anything about elections. I would say forming more concrete commitment toward that particular vendor is ill-advised, especially since we now have this open source voting system opportunity right here in front of us. So what I'm hopeful is that we do everything we can to live up to our moral obligation to show leadership within the state and then therefore the country on this issue of all hands on deck, all efforts toward the future better system and the immediate phasing out of the inferior legacy system. Thanks to you all for your great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was it for callers.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
So no more public comments. I don't think there's action items based on this, and given the need to just, this will reappear as a agenda item on the February 14th agenda then. So I think we can move on, which would be any agenda items for future meetings of BOPEC. Since we're an ad hoc committee, I don't know that there would be any of those. Okay. And we can move to adjournment then.
I think you need to take comment on the item.
On the agenda item for future meetings, certainly. Any comment on the future meeting agenda item?
There aren't any hands raised.
Okay, I don't see any comments from my fellow commissioners. Okay, great, thank you. So we can adjourn this meeting. Thank you, Director Arntz and Deputy City Attorney Flores. It is 4:05 p.m. by my computer, and hope everybody has a safe and healthy weekend. Maybe even have fun.
You too. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Anna. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.